Is a fantasy football destroying RBBC about to happen on the East Coast? What AFC East wide receiver is not getting enough love from FFPC drafters? And what's the proper return for Derrick Henry in high-stakes dynasty leagues right now? Plus, 2021 four-time FFPC high-stakes dynasty champ Ryan Zaborowski drops in to talk Kyle Pitts, Amari Cooper, Greg Dullich, George Pickens, and much more. We've got a great show for you. Farrell Elliott is here. I'm Eric Balkman. Stick around. Your high-stakes fantasy football hour starts right now. Pressure. I've seen greater men than neither lesser.
Broadcast live and heard around the world, you are now watching the most entertaining hour of radio on the planet. Welcome to the High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour presented by MyFFPC.com with your hosts Eric Balkman and Farrell Elliott. The High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour is your home for analysis from the best players in the world. And now, because no one else was available, here are Eric Balkman and Farrell Elliott.
Solace in the scripture, are we not all our father's sons? I became a man, nobody ever told me what a man was. Thank you, Rob. Greetings and salutations, all you Balkaholics and Freliacs. Welcome to the latest episode of the High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour presented by MyFFPC.com. I'm your slightly above average host, Eric Balkman. My co-host is the definitive commissioner of fantasy football, Farrell Elliott. Shout out to the Quiet Hollers as well for the our theme music. Remember to check out their music at quiethollers.com on iTunes, Apple Music, or anywhere you download your music. Coming up on tonight's show, we're going to talk a little bit about what Brandon Cook's new contract extension means for fantasy, what under-the-radar Big Ten receiver is about to make a significant impact in his first year in the league, or maybe not. We'll get into it. And then 2021 four-time FFPC Dynasty Fantasy Football champ Ryan Zaborowski swings in to talk about Terry McLaurin, Amari Cooper, George Pickens, and much more on how to build championship dynasty rosters. If you want to connect with us on Twitter, the show is at HSFF Hour. I am at Eric Balkman. And of course, check out Farrell's Kentucky Fantasy Football State Championship at KFFSC.com or at KFFSC on Twitter. You can post on our Facebook page, facebook.com/HSFF Hour. You can also email the show at highstakesfantasyfootball@gmail.com. If you have any questions for us, now is the time to send those in. We'll do our best to get to all the chat room questions, all the tweets, and all the emails that come up throughout the program in our fantasy feedback segment coming up later in the show. Thanks to our audio engineer and my best friend Bryce, and our producer and mutual friend Rob. Want to bring in my co-host with the most right now. It is the one, the only, the incomparable Farrell Elliott. Farrell, it's exciting because as of today, we are fewer than 3 weeks away from the 2022 edition of the NFL Draft.
Oh, but I can count the days. It's fascinating on so many levels. I actually have players that are in the draft this year, although they will wait until the draft is concluded before they actually find out where they're going because they're likely free agents. It's interesting from an agent's perspective, as you said as you approach the draft with the type of players I represent. You wish you had a few extra days because you're gaining a little momentum. You're having a lot of conversations. If you represent the players that we're going to talk about tonight, you're going to look at it in one way and say, oh, man, can this thing get here? I got to get it done with. Those last few hours leading up to the draft drag like days. I've been on both sides of the equation. I would rather well, actually, both sides have its value. It's all a lot of fun, and it means everything for all our drafters that are in the best ball contest right now, and naturally, everyone waiting for that bell to go off on the FFPC Dynasty drafts, of which I am looking forward to partaking in for the first time in my career playing fantasy ball.
It's fun. I mean, there's so many deals, especially after the NFL draft ends on Sunday. You see a ton of deals get done with people swapping players and picks now, kind of knowing where everybody's going to be going at in the draft. It's an exciting time. It's exciting not only for dynasty players, but for redraft players as well. And don't forget, if you want to get involved in dynasty startups, they are available at myffpc.com/dynasty. We do have a few dynasty orphans left. myffpc.com/dynasty for sale. The Never Too Early Best Ball Tournament, which Farrell alluded to, that's going off right now. We're almost 80% full on that. So that's probably I shouldn't say probably going to sell out, but there's a good chance that it sells out before April 28th. Remember, on April 28th, the start of the NFL draft, that's when those drafts will cut off for the Never Too Early Best Ball Tournament. The Football Guys Players Championship Early Bird promo is active, $35 discount if you register prior to June 30th and draft prior to July 15th. And then, of course, we're giving away $1 million first prize in the 2022 FFPC main event, nearly $6 million in the prize pool. And if you do want to participate in some some closed 12-team leagues, slow, live, sit and go, whatever you want, best ball options are available not only at myffpc.com, but you can register for the Run to Daylight Championship and, of course, the Draft Masters and much more at kffsc.com. Let's get into the Fantasy Flash tonight. And I want to kick things off with some Indianapolis Colts news. I wanted to bring this up a couple of weeks ago and ran out of time, but I think this is interesting to bring up. Mike Sando from The Athletic had a report that came out this week that said an NFL executive was quoted as saying age has caught up with Matt Ryan, the league executive who's unknown to us, but that told Sando the quote, I had him with a big decline last year. He's had a phenomenal career, great quarterback, but he wasn't super big athletic or had a super strong arm. I see the skills declining a little bit quicker for him as a result. I think they could be looking at another quarterback in a year, which, let's face it, the Colts have been doing that every year for like the last half decade, it seems like. They gave up a third-round pick in March to get Matt Ryan. Last year for the Falcons, in a really bad offense, Matt Ryan had the third lowest adjusted yards per attempt of his career, along with his second worst ever touchdown rate. Ryan was 23rd in adjusted expected points added per dropback, right behind Carson Wentz, who he is replacing in Indianapolis. Now, if he's not asked to do much, again, if you're just going to let the offensive line kind of take things over and let Jonathan Taylor do his thing, then maybe Matt Ryan is a bargain right now. Farrell, I guess my concern here is if the Colts either A, draft somebody or B, sign someone. I think at receiver, I think this is interesting. And then Michael Pittman is sort of the wild card in all this. What does this do for Pittman if Matt Ryan has indeed lost a step and maybe is not the athlete that he used to be in Atlanta?
Man, this one question, Balky. This is the whole show. We can throw everything up. Okay. First of all, I've lost respect from this writer. He used super suspect and super big arm in the same sentence. We can't have that. The NFL executive, it sounds like somebody's hanging out at the Breakers bar a little too long talking about Matt Ryan. Let me tell you what we had in Matt Ryan. Let's look at it both ways. Looking back last year, I didn't get Matt Ryan in many drafts, but I wish I had, especially through week 8. There's no quit in Matt Ryan, and he was dealing with a young coaching staff I respect, but he's a veteran dealing with a new coaching staff, and they're brought in here to direct the ball to a rookie tight end that we'll talk about a little bit later. But guess what happened? 8 weeks into the season, Matt Ryan had 4 games of over 300 yards. And something happened at week 8 in the season. There's no quit in Matt Ryan, but there was quit in his star wide receiver. So there's a lot of things that playing for the Atlanta Falcons was a difficult situation. Now you're going to project that Matt Ryan is losing something. I think Matt Ryan goes to Indianapolis and his career will be somewhat reborn. And that we talked about Michael Pittman, a player that I absolutely loved. I didn't believe you could overdraft Michael Pittman last year. I don't think you can this year. He doubled his output in catches from his first to his second year. Of course, he won't double this year, but he'll hit 100 catches, and Matt Ryan will benefit him tremendously. The players around him, adding wide receiver quality throughout the draft. He's got preeminent number 1 running back. He's got backs that in depth that can catch the ball out of the backfield. He's got an excellent offensive line and coming defense in a division that, let's just say that it doesn't give some of the challenges that other divisions that Matt Ryan is used to playing in have throughout his career. So Matt Ryan should be on your draft board, and he's not going to hurt any players that you have on your roster, and is likely going to enhance those players.
I like Matt Ryan as a solid number 2 quarterback. I mean, if you're in the Never Too Early Best Ball Tournament, if you want to wait on quarterback, I think he is fine as your second option as well. Currently in the Never Too Early Best Ball Tournament, shout out to Darren Armati from FantasyMojo.com, at FantasyMojo on Twitter for this ADP. but currently Matt Ryan is quarterback 21. Michael Pittman, the aforementioned Michael Pittman, wide receiver 26. That's right after Michael Thomas, Mike Williams, and Cortland Sutton, right before Allen Robinson, Amon-Ra St. Brown, and Devontae Smith. Michael Pittman firmly in the 6th round. And if he does indeed catch 100 passes, as Farrell Elliott believes he will, that is a great bargain there. Hard to disagree with you there, my friend. This came up earlier today, I think, Friday. At least I think this is the last time I saw, or the first time I saw it. Ian Rappaport said that Melvin Gordon is in discussions with the Baltimore Ravens. Now, if he does indeed sign with the Ravens, he's going to be coming into a backfield not only with J.K. Dobbins, but Gus Edwards as well. While both these guys are coming off the ACL injuries, this would be a fantasy quagmire. Giggity, giggity. He turns 29 in April, does Melvin Gordon. And second highest yards per carry of his career last year with 4.5 in Denver. He got into the end zone 10 times. I don't know what would – well, let's talk about both sides of the coin here. Number one, Farrell, if Melvin Gordon signs in Baltimore, are Gordon, Dobbins, and Gus Edwards off your board? And number two, how high up would you take Javonte Williams? I'm still of the belief if Gordon is gone, they bring in somebody, but it won't have anybody with the pedigree or the reputation of Melvin Gordon.
Williams has already maxed out his draft position, and I've seen him go as early as the late 1st round. We might tell the listeners how they can get involved with Darren Armani and get the mojo numbers, because not everybody can say, "Hey, Balky, what's the mojo on that?" I don't
Not everybody can.
I don't know exactly what it is, but that's how I figure it out. But okay, Baltimore backfield. What a great addition from an NFL team standpoint that this player would be to the Ravens. What a disaster it would be for the other players as fantasy players in the Ravens backfield. I think it's necessary that they continue to add assets in the backfield to ensure that Lamar Jackson doesn't have to carry the whole load there. And how wonderful it would be. You can't elevate the tight end Andrews anymore, but having a star player in the backfield of Gordon's resume would benefit him as well as Marquise Brown. So it's a great thing for the passing game to have another kind of back like that on the roster. I hope he goes somewhere where we can count on him getting 225 carries. That's what I want to see for this player.
Yeah, I would too. Javonte Williams, by the way, over the last 7 days, if you want to sign up for FantasyMojo.com's service, well worth it, especially if you're playing the FFPC, FantasyMojo.com. 103 was the earliest Javonte Williams went in the last 7 days in a never too early best ball tournament. The thing is, and this is something, I can't really equivocally say, oh, I'm off Gordon, I'm off Dobbins, I'm off Edwards, if indeed Gordon does sign with Baltimore, because I don't know I don't know what the perception created is going to be. I don't know how far down Gordon will tumble and Dobbins and Edwards. And at that point, especially if I go 0 RB, one of those guys might make some sense. So
and
as it stands,
if you pick the one that's going to get the goal line, and that may become Gordon has always been a great contributor around that goal line.
10 touchdowns last year in Denver. Could be even bigger in Baltimore with the way they run the ball. We shall see on that. Ian Rappaport also had a busy week as he reported Brandon Cooks' contract extension with the Texans includes $36 million guaranteed. What's interesting about that? That means of his $39.6 million deal that he signed, 90% of it, or roughly 90% of it, is guaranteed. This is another big-time payday for an NFL receiver. Even though Houston's offense is not very good and it is very conservative, only 3 receivers last year had a higher rate of their team's air yards than Brandon Cooks, who had 40% in Houston, and his 28% target share was 6th overall in the NFL. He turns 29 years old in September. Farrell, death, taxes, and Brandon Cooks being a wide receiver too. I don't see it changing this year. I don't care if it's Davis Mills. I don't care if it's a rookie. Cooks always seems to do it no matter where he is, no matter what offense he's in, and no matter who his quarterback is.
Balky, good things come to those who wait, and Brandon Cooks has waited and has been rewarded. I think it's tremendous kick for Davis Mills. I love the quarterback situation there, and I love the fact that no one is drafting this quarterback, and I think it's tremendous to put himself together with this kind of receiver on the field with all the other potential emerging talent. No, this team is perhaps not going to win a lot of games, but they could win you fantasy games, because some of these guys, especially early on, that find their hold in this roster and continue to play better. I think of Nico Collins in that respect. You take a situation with this quarterback in that respect, and we always know Cooks is going to deliver. These guys can deliver for you later in the season, and hey, that's what we need.
Brandon Cooks, wide receiver 33 right now. It's kind of a sweet spot, quite frankly, in the 7th round there. There's a lot of guys I like there. Adam Thielen, Juju Smith-Schuster, Darnell Mooney, all going in the 7th round. They're all kind of lumped together. So if you miss out on Cooks, who would be my target there, I think there's some nice consolation prizes. Speaking of receivers in the AFC, I wouldn't say right after we went off the air. I would say about 12 hours roughly after we went off the air last Friday. There was a trade, an intra-divisional trade between the Patriots and Dolphins, where New England gets Devonte Parker and a 2022 5th-rounder in exchange for a 2023 3rd-rounder being sent to Miami. New England reportedly contacted the Carolina Panthers about Robbie Anderson when they were at the Combine. And Devonte Parker not only got interest from the Patriots, we got interest from the Eagles as well. New England should give Devonte Parker a lot more targets than he was going to see in Miami with the acquisition of Tyreek Hill and obviously Jalen Waddle already there. But the Patriots do run the ball a lot. And Mac Jones in the bottom half of the league in deep accuracy last year in passes over 20 yards. He was only completing a little bit over a third of them. Parker, 2 years, $17 million remaining on his contract. This could be a 1-year rental with only $2.7 million of his contract next year guaranteed. I think this is a good spot for Devonte Parker. I'm excited about drafting him. I don't care that New England is a run-heavy team because, quite frankly, unless you're the Eagles, even if you're a run-heavy team, you're still passing the ball a lot. And I think Devonte Parker is going to pay off on his draft spot right now.
I do too, Balky, and this is a player that we have great love for here in the KFFSC. You'll see him go
Louisville's own.
Yeah, a couple of rounds earlier down here. I've very pleased and proud for his agent, a fellow named Jimmy Gould, who's a hardworking agent, did a great job with this. Parker's situation basically is that he has been admired for the coach. If you go to Pro Football Focus, you can see that against Coach Belichick, he's had some of his better days. And it's been 2 years removed from his best season, but a change of scenery for Devonte Parker was in order, going to a coach that respects his talents. I think that's a mixture for fantasy success.
Wide receiver 66 in the 14th round right now.
That's a steal.
That is a steal. Right after rookie Sky Moore, right before James Washington. I like Devonte Parker, and I do believe that he will climb up boards. Over the last 7 days, this is the last 7 days, so obviously some of these drafts were going on after or before he was traded. But even like the highest he's been picked in the last 7 days, 1206. Come on, people. Devonte Parker is worth more than that. And we shall see what happens when we get to the managed leagues rather than the set and forget it best balls as well. We have Ryan Zaborowski, the 4-time 2021 FFPC Dynasty champ, coming up. The last thing I want to get to before we get to him, Pro Football Network's Aaron Wilson talked about Nebraska rookie wide receiver Samari. I hope I'm not butchering his name. Samari Toure is drawing, quote, heavy interest from Kansas City, Cincinnati, Green Bay, Indianapolis, and San Francisco. Toure had a record for Nebraska this year, 100 yards receiving 5 different times. And this is a guy who could be the lid lifter for Kansas City and or Green Bay after they lost theirs via free agency and a trade. Toure last year, second highest yards perception in Nebraska history at 19.5. And he caught 4 balls for 150 yards and a touchdown against Ohio State in November. Everybody saw that on the national stage. He was a transfer coming from Montana, where he caught 155 balls for 2,500 yards and 20 touchdowns in just 3 years. Nobody talks about Toure. Farrell, is this guy just a deep threat, or is this the type of guy that maybe could be a bona fide number 2 for Kansas City, Green Bay, or any of those other teams I mentioned?
Yeah, I think he is a deep threat who will become, and not maybe in one season, but over a period of time, a player that will separate himself and be a higher volume receiver. That being said, you can't predict what a player can do when he brings speed to the league. And he's a perfect example of how the transfer portal is working for players. Guys that went to college, maybe they were a little undersized, they didn't get the attention, maybe they went to a small school, they go to Montana with this same skill set. If he had stayed in Montana, he would have been 6th, 7th round draft pick or a free agent. He gets the opportunity to play in the Big Ten, good for him. We talked about last week how players came to the combine at the wide receiver position, and no one really hurt themselves. Happened a lot at the running back position as well. It's a situation where there's a lot of heat on players late because the scouts want to make sure they cover these players. And the backlog of players brought on for COVID is significant. There's a lot of players in this draft. So, there's a great deal of work to do. And this player seems to be emerging from all of it in a good situation. So good for him. He's a player that we need to go back. And I encourage the fantasy players that don't get to watch as much college football as they would like to go back and look at those highlights. They're on YouTube. They can understand who that player reminds them of, and that can give them comfort with the player moving through the draft.
This will be a good, interesting test because as of right now, Toure is not being drafted in the Never Too Early Best Ball Tournament. He's not being drafted in Dynasty startups at the FFPC right now. If all of a sudden his name appears next week, Farrell, I think we'll pat ourselves on the back, bringing him to the attention of high-stakes fantasy owners nationwide. Speaking of, one of those high-stakes fantasy owners is going to join us right now. I want to bring in our guest this evening, ladies and gentlemen. He's been playing Dynasty fantasy football for almost 2 decades. He currently has 14 FFPC Dynasty teams, 4 Dynasty titles in 2021 alone. The 750 number 25, the 250 number 14, the 250 number 177, and of course the 250 best ball number 156. He's here to discuss how he did it and how he's going to continue to do it, or at least plans on continuing to do it for the next several years. You follow him on Twitter at ZABO7979, Zabo7979. Please welcome onto the program, Mr. Ryan Zaborowski, to the High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour. Ryan, welcome. Congrats on all the great success in 2021, man.
Hi, thanks, Spelky Farrell. It's good to join you. Always good to talk Dynasty. Been really grinding the rookies really hard for a couple of months now, and just happy to share whatever I can and just talk some Dynasty.
Absolutely. We appreciate that. Do you watch a lot of college football during the season to try to get a handle on these guys before they enter the NFL draft?
I always want to, and it never happens. This is the year I'm going to do it. I'm going to watch it while I'm watching NFL, and it never happens. So right after the end of the season, from January to all the way up to rookie drafts, it's grind time, and I feel it's a really interesting class, and it's really interesting. It's really boomer bust. A lot of high floor. High ceiling guys that is landing spots going to depend a lot on, and it's really difficult when you're looking at things now before the draft to see how a lot of these are with some really big tiers with a lot of the guys, a lot of the receivers. I think I have like 8 receivers in my top tier right now, and if any of them go to like Green Bay or Buffalo, they'll be wide receiver 1.
Yeah. No,
Rocky, I want to tell Ryan about a way to cheat on watching college football and give you a plan for next season.
Okay.
I watch most of my college football Monday night after the Monday night game. You can go to the SEC network, Pac-12 network, Big Ten network. They all have condensed games, and you can get through probably one whole conference by 4 or 5 a.m. Shower, a little nap, you'll be ready to go to work, and you'll have your football.
That's all it takes, Ryan.
Okay.
That's all you need.
Well, when you put it that way.
Yeah, I mean,
Ryan Z, they're not going to call your name until they've called everybody else's anyway. So, you can get in there a little late, being that you're in, and it'll be fine. So I'll work with you on that come next year. I just wanted to throw that out there as a public service to you.
So just for anybody who's wondering, the key to Dynasty success, 10 hours of watching football on a Monday night and then going to work on Tuesday. That's what does it for Farrell. We'll get into what does it for Ryan here in a second. When you are not winning all these Dynasty titles, Ryan, can you give us a sense of how you're spending your time for work, employment, what you're doing for a living when you're not crushing the FFPC?
Sure. Yeah. So I'm a software engineer by trade. I don't do a lot of actual software writing anymore. It's more of managing teams and boring meetings and stuff like that. And listening to fantasy podcasts pretty much the whole time, whenever I can, to and from. But aside from that, a family, beautiful wife, 2 kids that are 6 and 9 that take up about all the rest of my other free time that I'm not, watching rookies or doing best ball drafts, which hadn't started yet. Have not done any of the too early best balls, but once after rookie drafts time, we're going to get back into the best balls.
I am finishing my 7th never too early best ball draft. I'm glad I'm getting most of them finished for a player like you gets over there. Last year, players like you were lining up to draft tight end from Atlanta via the Florida Gators, Pitts. Now, I thought this player was a 80 catch player. I thought it so much that I can't get past him catching 80 balls. He only caught 68, and he didn't find the red zone. And it was very confusing to me as to why he couldn't. We talked a little bit earlier in the show tonight about Matt Ryan. I'd like to know what your expectation was for this player last year. And since you haven't been drafting, I will tell you this, already built into this year's draft is the expectation that he not only does better with catches, that he tops last year's figure, but that he finds the end zone more. I think with the addition of Mariota, perhaps continuing the play, giving him more time to get open, trying to beat them with his feet, that's one way he can do it. What's your thoughts about this player, especially as with the fact that Ridley is now a permanent recluse from the Falcons roster?
So with Pitts, he's a guy I definitely also went all in a lot on to I went on a binge of getting orphans basically as a way to get Pitts when I realized when I got on my rookie drafts and only had one share of Pitts. I'm like, I need to find another way to get to do that. And he's just such a rare talent. And we all know that touchdowns are noisy, and you see it happen all over at all positions, including tight ends. So I'm not worried about that. What I am worried about is that some of the weaknesses of why Ryan couldn't get the ball to Pitts also, I think, might still be there with Mariota. Ryan really struggled with getting the ball. He was fine whenever he wasn't under pressure and everything was open. But either when he was under pressure, or he really didn't want to throw up those contested catch balls, want to throw up those 50-50 balls. And he would just kind of look for his other read and then get sacked eventually. Mariota, for the last time we saw him, I don't think he's really that much different. The idea of Marcus Mariota being a running quarterback and making things happen with his legs, and it really hasn't happened in the pros. So, is the coach who, or at least it was the offensive coordinator who was there, who benched him in order when they had success when Tannehill took over, he's going to be the one that's going to unlock Mariota? I'm skeptical there.
It's a thin line between love and hate with offensive coordinators.
Yeah.
It's a very, very thin line. But you're mentioning Dave Ragone, who's another University of Louisville product, who had the disappointment of being drafted to the Houston Texans when they still had Carr as their quarterback, and he never got off the bench. But a good football mind. It's a good question. It is a good question. So what are you going to do with Pitts? If you were to get in one of the never too earlys, you're going to have to draft him in the second round to get him. Would you do that?
I probably wouldn't. I would probably looking at one of the cheaper tight ends that are, whatever reason, their draft positions less than their actual value, like Dalton Schultz or Dawson Knox. They're still going, towards the end of the tight end one for some reason or another. Not that I believe in Pitts and the talent, but it might work. It'll work out at some point. I don't know if it's going to be this year. They probably a good chance they draft a quarterback, which who knows that could be, and it'll work at some point. I don't know if it's going to be this year.
He might be a good acquisition in Dynasty then after 2022. Good buy low guy, right?
I don't think you're buying low ever on Cowboys.
Really? Yeah, on the FFPC, you're always paying.
Nope.
Okay.
As long as he has all of his limbs, you're not buying low.
He'll be the greatest one-handed catcher ever to play in the NFL.
One-handed Kyle Pitts is still probably a first overall, or not first overall. He's still a first or second round pick in the FFPC for sure. Terry McLaurin, he gets a quarterback upgrade now this year, Ryan, with Carson Wentz. So now the narrative would be, better quarterback means better stats. But is that more of something that's just a nice idea to think about? Or is this actually going to come to fruition where McLaurin actually does have a big season in a contract year, by the way, for Washington. And I'm kind of curious because you have it. I don't want to say it's polarizing, but you have certain dynasty people believing that McLaurin's in for a big year. Then you have a lot of other people that saying that this Wentz thing is not going to do much for him. Where do you reside on this?
Well, you said the word upgrade, and you also said better without the air quotes around it. And
Right.
As someone who watched Carson Wentz in Philadelphia for years, I mean, we all know he stinks. He went to Indianapolis, and the whole story for why they traded the picks around him was Frank Reich was the one guy who was going to unlock him back to that magical
MVP
2/3 of a
type
season.
Yeah.
And they immediately wipe their hands of him. So they're telling you everything what to know. I mean, the fact that Washington traded picks for him, I mean, we should be like doing the opposite of whatever Washington does. So, I mean, sad to say, I'm a really big Terry McLaurin fan. I mean, they're probably also a good bet to draft a receiver too. So not only does his quarterback throw like a trebuchet and has the footwork of a tank, but like, I don't know, a lot of the Terry McLaurin has got his production because he was the only show in town. There's been a lot of whispers about them drafting a receiver, and that's just going to take other targets away. We know that Wentz likes to throw to his tight ends a lot because he can't throw to his receivers as well as he wants to. So, so I believe in Terry McLaurin. If you're buying Terry McLaurin, I think you're buying on the hopes that he gets on this receiver money that everyone else is getting, saying, pay me $30 million or trade me. And teams are standing up and saying, okay, fine. So if you're trading for Terry, I think that's what you're hoping for.
Yeah, the spots for an expensive receiver are becoming less throughout the league as each day goes by. Let's talk about another.
Jets are
receiver.
still looking for one though, Farrell.
Who's that?
The Jets are looking for one still.
Oh, aren't they though? You know, they can't. Yeah.
Well, of course, they're always looking for everybody. So I guess
God bless the Jets. They just have the best backup quarterback in football. You know, went to Western Kentucky. What can I say? I am new, Ryan. I don't know if you know this, but I am new to the Dynasty game. After a lengthy career as an NFL sports agent, looking at rookies every year, and finally, after my 10th or 12th year playing fantasy ball, it came to my conclusion that, you know, Dynasty would be a good deal for me because, you know, I know a little something about the rookies. We'll see how that all works out. But you know, and you say you've got a 6 and a 9-year-old at home. All this talk of orphans and adopting, do they get a little confused from time to time? They come home and see if anyone's moved into their room or something? They understand this situation?
No, just that daddy brings home the money. That's all that counts. I pay for the pizzas. They're all good.
Fantasy players took wide receiver Cooper with the Dallas Cowboys and had to be pleased that would be their receiver bringing home the money. And then they wake up and find that he is a Cleveland Brown. And then they wake up and find they've got a new quarterback, or do they? And how is it going to work? And so what would you do with Cooper if he's on your rosters? Are you going to hold him? Do you expect him to have a year? And what would you trade him at any cost? Is this one of the guys that you know, could command draft picks as we get ready for your dynasty drafts? Your thoughts on Amari Cooper?
All right, so Amari Cooper, I've been a big fan of Amari Cooper. I felt like he was undervalued for a couple of years in Dallas, and he went on this roller coaster of being a Brown to undervalued to, you know, we don't exactly know. And whether or not I would keep him or trade him, I guess it depends on whether or not I'm a contender, because of the whole Deshaun Watson scenario. Really just kind of smells. I mean, we don't know what's going to happen as far as suspension, but money talks. And in this case, the money of the contract talks is that when he negotiated his base salary down to a year, they're obviously expecting a suspension. So I'm going to follow the money and expecting that some sort of suspension's happening, and that affects my ability to really go hard for trading for Amari Cooper. That being said, if you're talking 6-game, 8-game suspension, and you have a stacked roster, may as well hold on for him. And he's definitely a guy that can win you a title. He's still really good. He's just, has his injury issues, but yeah, I mean, he's really been underrated for a while. I don't know, the whole Cleveland Browns scenario, it just doesn't seem like it's going to be there's a scenario of anybody just like saying, no, I don't want to go there. And, saying, how about this much money? Well, on second thought, does that ever work out for anybody? The whole thing just kind of smells, got stink lines coming from it. I don't know. I'm wary, so I won't be trading for Cooper anywhere, but I will probably be holding on to him and the teams I have him that are
Cooper
contenders.
is a hold.
It's like Billy Bean in Moneyball, where, well, I mean, not Billy Bean, but Brad Pitt is Billy Bean in Moneyball, where I made one decision in my life based on money, and I'd never do it again. Which, I mean, I'm sure there's players in the NFL that would say the same thing. We've been talking a lot about receivers with you, Ryan. I want to shift to running backs here. You have Derrick Henry in several of your dynasty leagues in 2022. Are you convinced that, look, I'm just going to continue to ride him out? Not only for this season, but maybe the rest of his career. And I'll just, whenever he falls off the cliff, I'll have enjoyed that, all that production on my squad. Or are you looking to move him at this point, getting what you can? You think about the injury he had last year. Are there more coming in 2022? How do you view Derrick Henry from a dynasty perspective?
I mean, if you're going to trade him, it's tell me where that running back tree where you can get 25 point a game running backs is. And sure, you can trade him. Otherwise, I'm going to ride him till the wheels fall off. And a couple of my were teams that actually won a title without Derrick Henry. But other teams, some of the other orphans, I traded for Derrick Henry when he was hurt and was able to get him for a first and change. And I mean, we all know that it's bell cow running backs are bust, and there's so few running backs that have that share, that target share could be such a difference maker. He was winning people leagues until it was injuries. As far as his injury, I mean, to the best of my knowledge, I think it was his first major injury in the pros, maybe in college. I don't even remember. So, I mean, people look at age, but I don't know, he's just a different animal. I think you just throw out the playoff game, just totally ignore it for coming back off the injury. And other than that, we know he's a mutant, and I think just why ride him till the wheels fall off.
Smart. I drafted him in a startup dynasty last year, and upon his injury, moved him to the IR list, and no one in the league insulted me with an offer for him. So I appreciate that. All right, Balky, let's talk running backs. There's 14 Alabama running backs active in the NFL, and another one soon to join them, the kid Brian Robinson in this year's draft. And I have the 110 pick in the league. And so I want to ask you, should I draft rookie running back from Alabama who looks just like all the rest of them, a 6'1", 225 pounds, does a lot of good things and does them all well at the top level of college ball? Should I draft this player at the end of the first round?
It's a tricky question. It'll probably depend on his landing spot, but I guess from a talent standpoint, there's really not that much of a difference for Najee Harris and Brian Robinson. If you like Najee Harris, which everyone does, you probably should like Brian Robinson. The only difference really is that Najee was a very accomplished receiver who split out wide, ran wide receiver routes. But in between the tackles, they both, really hard runners, got a lot of yards on their own, a lot of forced missed tackles, did a lot of the dirty work and catch the ball, tough, big, all the same things that are Najee Harris. But for whatever reason, the NFL, and at least it seems like the dynasty community, is not as high on him. So the double-edged sword there that you have to think about is that with this draft stock and whether or not what we think, it's around what the NFL GMs think. And if they think that he's a two-down back, then he's going to get drafted behind someone who has, like the Saints that have Kamara, or maybe the Dolphins who just signed Chase Edmonds. They're going to typecast him in to be a two-count running back. I think he could do more than that, but it's going to be tricky with where he's going to get drafted. If he gets drafted day 3, then, definitely 110's out of the picture. It would depend on landing spot. I think he's probably more of a second-round guy for me right now. But it is a really bad running back class. Part of the reason I was catching up so late on drafting people is just the running back class is so bad. I would draft watch 3 running backs and just have to stop. Like, I just can't watch anymore. Just have to just put it up for the day. It's really rough as far as that. There's you got your top 2, you got Hall and Walker, and then you're looking like maybe a couple guys that you like depending on the situation with Robinson and White. And then it's just a lot of guys that just, I don't know, they need a lot of things to happen right to really see them to have fantasy value.
One thing I didn't realize until now when I'm just looking at him, what we're talking here, Ryan, and you kind of mentioned it. He did catch, as the main guy in Alabama's backfield last year, he did catch 35 passes. I would not have thought that it was that high. Not that I watched a ton of Alabama games, but I just never really thought of him as a pass catcher. But 35 catches is really good. And he also had, take it for what it's worth, but well over 1,600 total yards in the SEC, which is nothing to sneeze at. Gets in the end zone 16 times. Had a long of 63 yard run, 51-yard catch last year as well. So the explosive part of his game's there too. And you mentioned it too. Like when you have a running back class that is, it's top heavy with Hall and Walker and Spiller and what have you, but after that, it's just a lot of guys that kind of blend in, and Robinson might be a guy that's worth looking at, especially again, once we find out where he is, what his role is going to be. He's going to be a guy worth paying attention to. Another guy that I think is worth paying attention to, and he's picking up speed, speaking of rookies, is George Pickens. Is this guy, would you describe him as, when you consider all the other receivers that are going in the first and second round this year in the NFL draft, would you consider George Pickens a sleeping giant, given that hasn't gotten a ton of attention because he missed most of the 2021 season before he came back at the end with that ACL injury?
Well, I'm not sure if let's say not getting attention. I think the Dynasty community's on him. I think the NFL community's on him. Probably be a first or second round pick. So I wouldn't call him sleeping giant. He's kind of a lunatic, and I guess in a good way. I mean, he plays with no regard for his body. Lots of spectacular catches. He's kind of like skinny Mike Williams, I guess is the best way I could put it. He has tremendous ball skills, but just plays with no regard for his body. And not to mention maybe some off the field incidents he's had with getting in fights and also. So, I mean, he's a lunatic, mostly in a good way. He's a guy that is in that top tier of 8, which, I guess top tier, there's no guys at the top tier. I think everybody's like a tier 2 receiver for me this year. There's no one in the Chase or Waddle or Smith tier, but any 8, I mean, put him in Green Bay, then I'm interested after Hall and Walker. Yeah. But I think sleeping isn't maybe the word I would use. I think all the smart people could see all his spectacular catches and they're pretty on him already.
Always on in the FFPC are tight ends. And there's been a mixed bag, a Duke's mixture, if you will, of available tight ends that I've liked from college ball this year. And I really got on this player late. West Coast teams are a little bit more difficult for me to follow. So at UCLA, they have Greg Dullich, a tight end that not prolifically sized. He falls into that line of Zach Ertz or an Owen Daniels, or if you're really an old school guy, Dallas Clark. But what I really, really love about this player is that he's got a little wiggle to him. He can catch the ball and make things happen. I went back and looked at film, his game against LSU, 60-yard, 70-yard touchdown catch and run. Very impressive. The player came to the combine, and this is what really impressed me about him. While a lot of other tight ends were not working out, were holding off to their pro day to run, this kid did everything, and he did it well, especially when he ran the gauntlet. No player in that drill gets told, oh, you dropped balls in the gauntlet, we're not going to draft you. But what it does when they do well, when a player does well in that drill at the combine, it puts everybody on notice to take a look. So that's kind of what it did with me and this player. I really, really like this player. I mentioned the guys he reminded me of. They're all impressive players. Where are you on this tight end? Are you aware of him? Are you as high on him as I am?
I'm aware of him. I'm not as high on as you are. He's interesting, I guess. I think I'm not high on him just because of the nature of tight ends in general, especially with FFPC. Everyone knows tight end premium, and not enough people talk about the short benches. And at the end of the year, the cuts for down to 16, and where you have to draft some of these guys. I don't know exactly where he's going. We haven't seen any rookie drafts yet. If you have to draft him in the second or third round, but pretty much all receivers are projects. I mean, Pitts and Freiermuth being tight end ones last year for in the middle of the year were more of an anomaly than the rule. And I think he's a prospect. He's going to take some work, and but it's interesting. Wiggles. I think you used the right word with his slipperiness to be able to get open, but he's not that fast. He's not that big. So a lot of it, again, is going to depend on the situation. Is someone going to use him explicitly as a Y? They're going to split him out as a slot tight end, a move tight end, or he's going to go through growing pains of being in line. But yeah, definitely see some of the ability, and also I think he was his converter receiver. He put on like 40 pounds of weight and really grew into his body. Yeah. So there's
something else.
So there's definitely some ascension. The arrows pointing up there. I just don't think I really want to take a lot of these projects on in FFPC teams. I'm usually trying to get some of the tight ends after year one where they don't do anything. That's the time you buy, instead of trying to spend a second or third for Dullich. You get them for dirt at cut down time when people realize they can't put them in their 16, and that's usually the time to buy them.
Putting together that work of that long memory from.
Yeah,
and that's what it is too. I mean, let somebody else worry about, hey, I wonder if this guy's going to hit or not, and waste a roster spot on in year one. And then when they inevitably cut him in year two or given up on him on year two, maybe you can get them for cheap. And then that's when they could really perform, especially when you consider that, tight ends usually make this sophomore leap, especially in the NFL. A couple of emails here for you, Ryan. Paul in Tulsa writes, who are the Philadelphia Eagles to target, and who are the Philadelphia Eagles to fade this season? So when you look at the Eagles as a whole, Hurts and Sanders and Smith and all the guys at Goddard and all the guys that they got there, do you have any favorites on that team, and do you have any guys that will not be on any of your teams this year?
I'm a big Dallas Goddard fan, and it's nice to see that they finally moved on for Ertz and allow him to really step up. So I expect a lot more Dallas Goddard. As far as who they're drafting, Howie, just look at Howie's history. He's going to draft a receiver. He's got 2 picks. Other than Smith, and he kind of stinks at it, but it hasn't stopped him, for better or worse. He did the right thing with Smith. It still kept going to the well, and he's an analytically driven guy, and he has his process. The data drives that, and I would expect him to keep going at it, because they still need as much help as they're trying to build around Hurts, which I'm skeptical that he's the guy, but at least, put him in. They got a good offensive line, try to put his weapons, at least find out whether he's a guy. And now you got an extra pick for the Saints next year to give you the ammo if if he doesn't take that leap next year, and now you have the ammo to get a quarterback in a good class next year.
Yeah, that's totally accurate. West Palm Beach, Florida is where Mark resides, and he's sending his email from there. Hi, Ryan. Do you find yourself building a lot of your dynasty rosters around receivers over running backs? Thanks for the email. But by the way, thanks for the email, Mark and Paul. This is sort of like the old adage, right? Is you build around receivers because they have a longer careers, but then there is a pushback against that a few years ago, especially at the FFPC, where you could start 4 running backs every week, and they became devalued to the point where they became a value. How do you sort of look at these positions when you're building championship rosters in Dynasty, Ryan?
Yeah, it's always, that's the early dynasty trap that I fell in, early in my dynasty career. Is like, well, hey, the receivers are younger, their careers last longer. Why wouldn't I get, this per wide receiver X I could have for 15 years? I only get 5 years out of running back, but it's positional scarcity because you only get 5 years, good years out of running back, and everyone needs 2 running backs. That is what drives it, and especially in FFPC. compared to other rankings in the industry. You see that just running backs always go earlier, and that's just because there's a lot of sharp guys in the FFPC and know that running backs win championships. And like you said, with Derrick Henry, it's really the bell cow running backs, the ones who are going to score 20 plus points a game. And there's just so few because of all the running back committees in the league. There's just so few of them, and finding that is the most important. So for this year, it's really Hall, Walker, and that's it. And we'll see what happens with the 103. See what happens with wide receiver landing spots.
I'm all set, Farrell, on emails. It's up to you, buddy.
That's all the emails we got.
All the emails I had for Ryan. That's all the emails I have for Ryan. Yes.
I have a question for you, and this answer may change later. If it does, I wish you would email us because of what the work you've done with the rookie players. But right now, short of 20 days before the draft, is there one rookie? We've already talked about Walker, and I understand your appreciation of that player. So in addition to him, is there one rookie that you really desire, that you really could see playing for a number of your dynasty teams? And is there someone that you just say, the NFL likes him, but no way for me? I don't want anything to do with him.
Well, the answer to both of them can't be no, right? I mean,
yeah, we got to have something now, but you change it later, and we'll certainly put it on the air.
Yeah, I mean, it's so like running backs you mentioned, it's really Walker Hall, and other than that, Brian Robinson's on my list of definitely keep an eye on. Some interesting things I mentioned, some of the wide receivers, that's a tier of 8 that are there. Jalen Tolbert's an interesting guy because he's a small school guy, South Alabama. And when I watch small schools projects or players, I really just want them to really look like a man among boys. And that is exactly what Jalen Tolbert looked like. He had one game against the first game I watched against Tennessee. Like, okay, let's see him against a real team. First team was just a stone drop. I'm like, get ready to cue this guy. And then it was just utter destruction the rest of the game. So hadn't seen enough talk about him. Again, it's going to be a landing spot dependent thing. I don't know where his draft stock is, but just being so completely dominant. I think in the Senior Bowl, a lot of good reports on him being one of the better receivers in the Senior Bowl. Not that the cornerbacks are great at the Senior Bowl either, but he's a guy I have an eye on for keep an eye on his landing spot and see where he goes.
That's a good eye. That's a very good eye.
And as for guys I don't want to draft, Rashad White is probably at the top of the list.
Ooh.
Where I see lots of people in the industry having running back 3, and I don't get it. I mean, I thought he was 6'2" when I was watching him run because of how high he runs and just instantly goes down on contact. I mean, you give him an open lane against, some of these, whatever schools he was playing, directional Arizona, I don't even know. And yeah, sure, he's fast and he can catch the ball, but that's literally it. I mean, just no real vision whatsoever. No, remember, look at running backs. For the biggest things I want to look at is yards after contact, and what do you create that's not there? If it's blocked for 2, what do you get? Do you get 2 or do you get 4? Do you get -3? And with White, I see a lot of the getting what he's blocked or not, and he's like basically like great value Kenyon Drake is how I would describe him. Very flashy and jump cutty, and you just watch highlights. Yeah, he might be your guy. Watch the whole game and watch him against the best competition. We didn't play a lot of good competition, but when I'm watching running backs, I basically want to try to find like versus Alabama and Georgia, because that's the closest thing where you're going to look like playing in the NFL, and watch him in his worst game. Watch him playing against the best competition that he plays, and that's closest to what you're going to see in the NFL.
Ryan, question from the chat room. Hudson Kern Reeve wants to know who your top 4 dynasty rookie running backs are this year. I think you've made no bones about it. Your top 2 are Breece Hall and Kenneth Walker. Who are 3 and 4 for you this year?
It's Robinson, White, and Spiller in some order. I have them in a tier right now. Spiller, doesn't really do anything well. He does everything okay. He catches the ball, so that's good. Again, it's going to be a landing spot, I think, between those guys. And Zamir White really has a lot of the things I look for creating yards that aren't there, creating yards after contact, real hard runner. But he's just a complete unknown with in the passing game. Also has 8.5 inch hands, which could explain maybe why he doesn't get enough work in the passing game. But then again, he also played with James Cook and DeAndre Swift, so that could just as easily explain it. So, I mean, those guys are 3 through 5, and that's kind of just saying that it's really not a good running back class. It means trade up to get 1 or 2.
We traded up for our guest tonight, and we hit a home run or scored a touchdown, as it were, since this is a football podcast. Ryan Zaborowski, the 4-time 2021 FFPC High Stakes Dynasty champ. Thank you so much for not only coming on to talk a little bit about how you built these teams and how you were successful with them, but all this rookie analysis that you've given us tonight, not only with receivers, but especially the running back analysis. I know our viewers definitely appreciate that. Good luck to you in 2022, defending the belt in so many leagues and trying to win championships and more. We'll follow you on Twitter at Zabo7979. Thank you so much for joining us tonight, man. Be good, and we'll talk again soon.
Thanks, Balky and Farrell. It was a blast.
Thank you, Ryan.
Ryan Zaborowski, ladies and gentlemen, joining the High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour tonight. 4 Dynasty championships for him last year. And it's, I think it's a testament too, people just assume when these orphans get put out there that you can't do anything with them. Well, what did Ryan do? He said in a couple of them, like, look, I bought these teams. I acquired Kyle Pitts on a couple of them. I gave up a first-round pick to get Derrick Henry, and I won some titles, and that's what it's all about is seizing the day, making the most of it. And that's what he did. And I think, we don't have a whole lot of dynasty orphans left, but I think for the ones that are left, you can win a lot of titles. And Farrell, I think he made both of us better dynasty players tonight.
I think so too. And he gave, he's like, in a lot of ways, he's like talking to an NFL general manager. They're publicly, they come out and they try to find something positive about all players, but when they get behind closed doors, they start separating them. And he's obviously separated who he wants at running back, somewhat at receivers. I think there is a change in the kind of the position of what a tight end is going to bring to the NFL. That will happen over years, and will determine who's right about that. But nevertheless, he's plugged into what he wants to do, and I predict continued success for him.
Absolutely, no question. And we did go a little overtime with him tonight, which means we only have time for one email. Shockingly, it is from the commish in Louisville, Kentucky. I don't know who that is, but we're talking about comparing Duke Johnson,
another guy.
Yeah, I know him. Duke Johnson, the new Buffalo Bill running back, and then J.D. McKissick, who was going to be the new Buffalo Bill running back, came back to the Washington Commanders this year. It's kind of interesting because we've heard, and I'll kind of turn it over to you to see where you want to go with this, and I'll follow your lead here. But I can't remember if we mentioned it on last week's show or maybe it was 2 weeks ago, that Breece Hall was mentioned as a potential destination for the Bills at the end of the first round, which certainly would change the landscape, not only of that offense, but Devin Singletary and the rest of the Bills running backs there. But tell us a little bit about why you wanted to bring up Duke Johnson and J.D. McKissick as we compare these two players.
I have never been a Duke Johnson fan, but he is finally in the situation of last year and this year won me over. Last year, he got mixed up in that mess in Jacksonville, the poor guy, and he was largely inactive for the games until he went to Miami. He had his first 100-yard rushing game of his career. When he came to Miami, they asked him to give up what he does well, which is catch the ball and carry the rock for him, and he did well towards the end of the year. What's fascinating to me here, you look at Jamison Crowder, now Duke Johnson. These are veteran players that want to win a championship and want to contribute. We lose the offensive coordinator from Buffalo. He moves on to a head coaching position, and it appears that his second, Coach Dorsey, does value the third down running back position, which is what they have not had on this team. They've asked Singletary to do it, and he's done it fairly well, but I think we all think across fantasy football that Singletary does not look like a 3-down running back. And they had to promise to initially get Mckissick to this team. They had to promise him a very, very significant role. And he accepted that contract during the window, and Washington stepped up and matched it, or perhaps did a little more. Nevertheless, he stayed with Washington. He may someday regret that, because I think there's Super Bowl rings that will be measured for at the end of the year in Buffalo. So you take Duke Johnson and put him as the third down receiving back into this Buffalo Bills offense. I think you've got something for this player, which is a significant role. And this player is largely being undrafted in everything that we're doing now. Darren might be able to tell us on that famous mojo exactly what it is. But so it just brought my attention to that. And to finish it up, Duke Johnson went to this job for not a lot of money, which means to me that they broke it down to him as how he's going to be used. They gave him some incentives and told him, come help us win a title.
28 years old is Duke Johnson right now. So he's probably got a year or two left here before NFL teams will just look to the younger guy. But what's interesting about this, Farrell, and when you compare and contrast these guys, J.D. McKissick, running back 47 at the 1308 on average in the Never Too Early Best Ball tournament over the last week. And then you have Duke Johnson, running back 75, who is going in the 19th round. So certainly maybe if you want to avoid McKissick in the 13th round, which I don't necessarily think you should, but you could definitely get, J.D. McKissick light. Or maybe J.D. McKissick, depending upon what happens in that Buffalo backfield after the draft in the 19th round with Duke Johnson. I don't want to get hyperbolic here, but I think that there is something to what you're saying with the coaches, what they told McKissick, what they told Duke Johnson. I think there is something to keep in mind there. And certainly that's a situation we'll be watching not only as we lead up into the NFL draft, but as we get into Kentucky Fantasy Football State Championship drafting season, Football Guys drafting season, main event drafting season. It's all happening, as the kids say. And it's happened tonight. We had a great guest, Farrell, and you crushed it as always. We'll do this again next Friday. Thanks so much, man, and enjoy your weekend.
You too, Balky. I'll look forward to next weekend.
All right, that's Farrell Elliott, ladies and gentlemen, the commissioner, the definitive commissioner of fantasy football. Check out his work at kffsc.com. Join those leagues. Said already, Run to Daylight Open, as well as the Draft Masters Open there as well. That will complete this evening's festivities on the show. I want to thank Ryan Zaborowski. I want to thank Farrell Elliott, the FFPC, Rob, Bryce, and of course, each and every one of you for watching or listening. We certainly appreciate it. Next Friday, as I said, we will be back at it, 10-9 Central. We're going to have 5-time Dynasty champion Jay Utronki will join the program. And I forgot to mention this. We kicked off season 11 of the HSFF Hour tonight. Season 11 will roll on next year. Never really thought we'd be doing 11 seasons of this, but here we are, and we're doing it on video now, which is always exciting. A few Dynasty orphans left at myffpc.com/Dynasty for sale. Remember to register for the inaugural FFPC Never Too Early Best Ball Tournament. I said at the top of the show we're about 80% full on that, right around there. It goes until April 28th, which is 3 weeks from yesterday. It could sell out before then, so I would encourage you to get in now to make sure that you can exchange your $125 for a chance at $25,000 to be the champion of that we will crown in about 8 months or so, 9 months. The Football Guys early bird promo is also live. Register for that, myffpc.com. When you draft a registered team before June 30th and draft it before July 15th, you're going to get a free FFPC $35 credit to your account, which you can use on whatever you want. Plenty of slow live sit and goes, best ball leagues available, Superflex, Varsity, Terminator, all those different formats at myffpc.com. And then, of course, don't forget about the Run to Daylight Championship and the Draft Masters at kffsc.com. You can also register to win $1 million in the FFPC main event. Make sure you're taking advantage of that early bird promo. Get in before the end of next month. You're going to save $100 off your first team, and you'll save $500 off each additional team. Thanks so much for listening, everybody. We certainly appreciate it. Your weekend officially starts now.
This has been another episode of the High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour presented by MyFFPC.com. It was broadcast live and was watched around the world. Balky and Farrell will be back next week with more analysis, more interviews, and more advice from guests much smarter than they are. Thanks for watching, and we'll talk with you again next week.
The other thing I'll say before we sign off tonight, isn't it crazy that, and I was talking to Farrell before the show started, it's snowing here in Northeast Wisconsin right now on April 8th, and we got baseball games being rained out. It snowed out in some cases because of the inclement weather. This is a season that started late because of the lockout. And what are we doing? We're talking about Dynasty football. Not only would the games not be canceled on the field because of snow or whatever, but we're talking, and I don't mean to bag on baseball, but we are talking about, what does this trade mean? And what is this guy going to do in the NFL draft? And who's talking to him? And where's he going to end up? It's just crazy. It's a fun time of year for Dynasty fantasy football players. And I encourage you, if you have not participated in a Dynasty League before, make 2022 the year you give it your shot, and you probably won't go back. Thanks for listening, everybody. We'll talk with you again next